Welcome to Cycling Demystified, brought to you by Foundation Bike Fit and Frequency Cycle Works, the podcast where we help you take your cycling to the next level by sharing the knowledge from experienced bike fitters, mechanics, and the hidden players within the bike industry.
Welcome back to the podcast. We have a slightly unusual setup today. Ev, you're looking a little bit tense.
I see nothing wrong with what I'm doing right now. I've just clipped the mic to a pedal spanner.
Holding a pedal spanner,
So I'm acting like a podcaster,
maliciously.
holding a lapel mic in my hand because I've been told that my beard is too scratchy.
Yeah, we were getting a little bit of scratchiness, but
Not the good kind of scratching either, not like the DJ scratching.
DJ scratching.
DJ
Could you do that with
scratch.
your beard?
I could do, I suppose.
Yeah.
I saw a really good video of some cats on a pair of Technics decks the other day. They were scratching. That was cool. That was pretty fun. What were we talking about?
Anyway, welcome back to the podcast. Today, since we are ending January. Let's start that
I'm
again.
not prepared.
What year is this?
January 2025. We are heading towards the end of January 2025.
I just woke up.
We have passed New Year's. We have passed Christmas. And
Hurtling towards Pancake Day.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, mate.
Always, yeah.
Shrove Tuesday.
Yes.
What age do you get to where every holiday is you just think of the food that's associated with it?
It's all about food.
I suppose any age.
My daughter woke up like this morning and just said, I just dreamt all night about food.
Welcome to adulthood.
She's like, Dad, I'm looking forward to the resurrection of Jesus because pancakes.
It's not that, far from the truth. She's very, very into pancakes.
Do you reckon Jesus had pancakes? Maybe he invented them.
Mate, Easter and Shrove Tuesday are nowhere near each
Are they
other. No.
I have pancakes on
Where did you go to
Easter.
school?
Somers Town. They made a movie about it.
Camden.
Yeah.
Anyway, this got me thinking about traditions. Seeing as we have passed all the winter traditions, and actually we're about to get into Chinese New Year, which is another big tradition. So if anyone wants to buy anything from China at the moment, forget about it. Or get it in before the end of January. The whole country's about to shut
They're all
down.
closed.
What year are we going into?
The year of the snake.
Ooh. That's appropriate, isn't it?
Is it? We're talking about Ariones again.
No, we were
No.
talking about current affairs.
Ah, yes. It is the day after the inauguration as well.
Can we not, please?
Yeah, let's
We
not
don't do
get
America.
too
We don't do
political.
We
America
don't
in
do
this room.
America.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, we're already going to rattle the cage a little bit talking about traditions and why traditions may be holding us back from making progress.
Never.
Or perhaps we are a little bit too traditionalist and holding on to things that are stopping us from making progress.
maybe we're not traditionalist enough.
Ooh.
And maybe tradition is our natural gatekeeper.
It is.
good
It
one.
is. I was reading some stuff about how traditions are pretty much that, the natural gatekeeper, a method for improving security, social security, to help us deal with the uncertainty of life. And so, because traditions allow us to recreate the same thing over and over at the same time of year, there's a security and safety within enacting traditions. I feel this is very true for the bike industry. There's a lot of traditions that just exist because it does, not because of any particular logical function, but it just happens. And we seek safety within that. But if we are to innovate and to move forward, then we need to break out of some of the molds. And this always creates a little bit of conflict.
Which may or may not appear later in this conversation.
I've got a lot to say
I have a few things to say about this.
About conflict or tradition?
about
Both.
what you call innovation
Yeah.
Oh,
and what a lot of people in the bike industry like to call innovation
yeah.
that isn't.
Yeah, but
And there is one particular brand that we like to smash in this room quite often.
go on then.
And
Come
we'll
on
talk
then.
about that. All right,
Let's have
SRAM.
it.
That's
All right.
not where my brain went.
Well, I didn't want to get too rude too early.
Okay.
I mean, SRAM is already, their whole entire marketing spiel is like they are the disruptor.
Yeah, exactly. Disruption is not innovation. There's two sides. Well, there's three big players in bike stuff, right? In bike components. Those three companies.
2.5.
Well, let's just say there's three. Shimano, dead center, right? Campy, traditionalists to the extreme.
Which isn't a bad thing. It's not a bad thing.
They won't change even when it's broken. Shimano, very small steps, baby steps, innovation, iterative, right? Mm-hmm. That's the way to do it. Mm-hmm. And then SRAM, disruptive, because they got nothing better to do. And they just think, well, it's a marketing opportunity. Let's do something completely different so that we don't have to step on anybody else's patents. And then they do it badly.
Move fast, break things, go forward.
Well, yeah, they move fast, they break things, everybody else suffers.
Sideways.
And then they're like, oh, yeah, no, that didn't work. We'll move on to something different. And they keep just coming up. They keep trying to reinvent the wheel. And as we all know, there's a reason that there's that saying that you can't reinvent the wheel.
Well, who's right then?
Shimano. I mean, it's pretty...
Case closed.
That's case closed.
But don't you get frustrated with Shimano because they make things like so slowly?
Yeah, but that's why
it works.
The quality is consistent. That's why it's good. When they do make a mistake, they double down on recalls and things like that when there's like such a really, really tiny amount of actual incidences of something. When you consider how many...
What happened with those cranks then?
Yeah, but like 11 failures or something that were actually due to that problem.
Yeah, SRAM had a recall because some douchebag put too much thread lock on a shifter.
Yeah, that was like...
That's not a recall.
That's like...
You can have a recall on something, make sure it's proper, like cranks delaminating. Exactly. That's a proper reason
not something that can be solved with a hairdryer.
Not because some Burke put too much thread lock on some bolts.
Okay.
Anyway, aside from that,
so what is your point, Matt, about traditions? And did you have a...
It's been done that way for as long as it has been, for a reason. I'm particularly grumpy about certain things at the moment. Big cycling being the main thing. Big cycling is kind of my pet peeve at the moment. And I think you mentioned about innovation. I think a lot of what could be classed as innovation, SRAM.
Yeah.
That stupid new Colnago. It's not innovation. It's just doing something different for the sake of it. It solves a problem and creates 3 more as a result. There's a reason the bicycle hasn't changed in about 150 years.
UCI?
Partly.
No, because they weren't around 150
years
ago.
Right? Yeah, they were around.
Yeah, but they've stifled innovation, haven't they?
But is that a bad thing, though?
That's because they're an international racing federation, right?
Mate, if we didn't have the UCI, we'd have triathlon.
Exactly.
Do you want that?
Yeah, but...
Like, dogs and cats living together.
I feel like the UCI makes decisions very much out of fear and reactionary. Like, every time someone comes out with something a little bit new, they kind of go, no, we're going to ban it.
So it's on a pendulum, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you can the pendulum always swings too far in one direction before it settles in the middle, right? When, electric shifting first came out, and I'm not talking like the Mavic electric shifting when it first came out, I'm talking like Shimano, proper electric shifting. It blew everyone's tiny brains, and we thought, oh my God, this is the beginning of the end. Like, buy all the Campy we can, that sort of thing.
Maybe you thought that.
I've got some things to say about Campy. Not bad things. But now we're like, who are you if your bike still shifts on metal cables? Like, it's become normal. So the pendulum always swings so far in one direction before it settles. It's just the middle of where the pendulum is changes, depending on what the innovations are. So, that daft Colnago that, Ev rightly said was designed by crayons, with the gull wing handlebar and the missing bit and all that kind of stuff, that's probably going to become normal in maybe 5-10 years' time. We don't know. But at the moment, it's kind of way out of what we deem as centre, that everyone's like, well, people like me who like bikes to be a certain way, adjustable, they're like blowing their tiny little minds, going, "This is abomination of what cycling is," and all. And 10 years time, it's probably going to be, "Oh, that looks fairly normal." So tradition is necessary because it gives us a frame of reference as to what innovation is kind of doing. So it gives innovation context, but the context is always shifting. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And when I'm saying that, I'm checking my coherence, not your understanding.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I think, everything needs to be questioned every so often, but you have to have a reference point at which to kind of measure stuff against.
You have a yardstick, almost.
Yeah.
So the yardstick for a long time was 2 triangles, a horizontal top tube, quill stem, campy.
Yeah.
That was the yardstick.
Yeah.
And then it all changed, and the yardstick has been moved, and now we have a new reference point, and which is probably the specialised tarmac, or pluck something out of the air, and then the yardstick moves, and the innovation is still, the same distance ahead of where the yardstick is. It's just it's moved in tandem.
And I think this is where I'm interested in is like where is that yardstick at the moment? Because we had a lad who came in the other day, and we were searching for new bikes, and we ended up presenting a traditional kind of looking bike, horizontal top tube and stuff, and he outright rejected that because he was like, "Oh, it just looks a bit old, a bit, like weird. It doesn't have a slopey top tube."
Every brand new aero bike has a horizontal top tube.
I know. I think he just didn't like.
Was it metal?
It didn't have like loads of seat posts sticking out, and so
there is a contingent of cyclists that are like the seat posts. Contingent, they're like, "Well, it's got to have got to have at least a foot of seat post."
And so since like the giant TCR, which
that's a bit too much.
Created that, the compact frame geometry that we know now. Has that become like the traditional image of a bike now? Is that kind of what people want? And is it changing now? Now that integrated seat posts and handlebars and aerodynamics have taken the forefront of performance cycling, is that kind of what people expect now? Is that the new tradition? Is this the new status quo? And brands are following that. You look at a Track Domani AL, which is like the bottom end Domani, and it's still got all the hoses routing through it, even though it's got mechanical shifting and everything, and there's no need. There's even steel road bike, with
that
round tubes.
Bugs me that. Why make a steel bike where you hide all the tubes?
And cables into the tubes.
Cables into the tubes. Yeah. So
Exactly.
I can't even get my words out. I'm so annoyed.
So livid.
So livid.
Well,
But-
it's marketing, right? It's capitalism. They
but
want
this
to
is it.
sell
Is
things
it a new?
based on the image.
Is it tradition or is it trends?
It's trends.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have to distinguish between the two here of what is tradition and
The pendulum-
what is messing with tradition.
The pendulum is at one extreme at the moment, and it's now only very, very slow. It's a very big pendulum. It's the biggest pendulum. So huge. It's sorry.
I've seen it.
Make pendulums great again.
It's gonna.
Too soon, bro.
It's
Too
like
soon.
literally like too soon. Hasn't even happened yet. The pendulum is coming back. It's it's going to come back, but it's kind of like it's not really like a pendulum, is it? Because the goalposts are constantly moving. So when the pendulum swings back, you've already travelled a certain distance. So but the centre is no longer what the centre was 10 years ago. It's a little bit further on, but it's still actually. I was taking the piss out of the Colnago, but if you look at that, it's still just a bike. Yeah, they've tried. They've tried to funk around with the tube shapes and the kind of shapes of it and try and hug the rear wheel, but it's nothing special. It's still
Still two wheels.
Still two wheels. It's still standard brakes, standard everything.
Yeah.
It's got a stupid what do you call it? Fork.
Bayonet
fork or whatever.
Yeah.
But which isn't their design is pretty cack, to be honest. It's pretty bad. It's actually really
But
bad.
doesn't it have like a skateboard truck bearing or something?
Yeah, it's so bad.
They didn't design it to be useful.
But no, but they didn't design it to last.
Yeah.
Right? Those bikes, you're not supposed to go into the shop and ask for one of those. You're not supposed to buy it. They just have to put it on the market, like a Group B rally car. They had to put them on the market
Yeah.
And some idiots bought them and get to the end of their road and realise
Yeah.
they have to refuel. It's not supposed to be for punters, but under the rules,
Yeah.
and the UCI's got a lot to answer for here as well. Under the rules, you have to market it. You have to sell a certain number of units.
A mate of mine at college had a Group B rally car. He had
Yeah.
a Skoda Fabia VRS. Called it Bess. That thing went like stink. Yeah, that was so much fun.
Did it have a roof?
It did have a roof. But
Until you wrap it around a tree and then
Well,
it doesn't have a roof anymore.
came close.
Just the roll cage.
But yeah,
Yeah.
just because you can buy it doesn't mean that you should.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. It's like now people have got so much disposable income because of credit and finance and capitalism and general,
Big cycling.
Western values, that they're buying things that were supposed to be out of reach. They were supposed to be the things that you advertise your brand with, the aspirational stuff. But when people actually walk into the shop, they go, well, I could never afford that. But now you've got me in the shop. Sell me something that's appropriate for my budget. You don't do that anymore. People are literally just going to the top thing, not realizing that they weren't trying to sell you that.
So
You're
here's
an
the thing
idiot if
then,
you go-
based on that concept, do we think that maybe a lot of kind of, especially, well, basically people that aren't as old and grumpy as us, who haven't been doing it for as long as us, need to go through some of that tradition and that law of what cycling is, however you want to kind of frame
Yes.
it, to get some additional context for when they purchase and go and ride the quote unquote innovative or cutting edge stuff.
Yeah.
So, because I mean, we were talking about this the other day, like some people who come through the studio have never ridden a mechanical group set.
Yeah.
Or did I say mechanical? Cable actuated shifting group
Yeah.
set. It's all mechanical.
Yeah.
But that blows my mind.
It also
Because it doesn't give you, it doesn't like create context.
It's like growing up, getting into cycling as a hobby, getting your hands on whatever you can afford as a youngster.
And tinkering with
And
it.
tinkering with it. It's
Yeah.
not going to be the top level thing.
Yeah.
The reason that there are, really good athletes is because they started young and they didn't have the best equipment. Now, going forward, the new generation, you've got kids growing up, they've got the best equipment. They already have no excuse.
Yeah.
The equipment is the top range, right? So if you're not good enough, you're going to find that out really, really quickly. So you're going to have a real quick drop off of loads of kids getting, or loads of late teens, early
But
20s,
even-
just giving up because they realise that, well,
They've reached the peak
I
too quick.
reached the peak
Yeah.
and I couldn't get any further.
But even beyond racing, and just because most of us don't cycle to race bikes, most of us do it to enjoy it, stay fit, to eat cake, whatever. Not have it like traditions help us put into context what we have now. That's kind of the whole point, right?
Yeah.
And I feel that there's a lot of potentially kind of people missing out on getting the most enjoyment out of what they have, whether that's a bike, whether it's some sort of indoor setup, whatever it is. If you don't have a frame of reference of what's come before, you can't appreciate what is here and now and what comes in the future.
There's no progression.
There's no progression.
So there's no
exactly.
satisfaction.
Yeah.
Because you're not progressing through life. You're not.
No, you're just there.
There's no wins.
You bought
There's
it.
nothing. Yeah. There's no journey.
Yeah.
You're just hitting
So,
your destination.
In this context, this is why tradition is very important.
Yeah.
And should not be kind of like looked down upon and poo-pooed and all this kind of stuff. But on the flip side of that, you can't get stifled in tradition because then there's no innovation and nothing moves forward. So
You're
it's a
saying-
6 of one and half a dozen of the other.
Yeah. You're saying it's a bit like getting loads of presents and not having Christmas. So
Yeah.
You need Christmas in
or
order to.
it's almost like not. It's like getting asking for presents and then it's like Amazon and then they just turn up.
Yeah.
There's
That
there's no
genuinely happened this year.
Yeah.
So just a little funny story about that. So we had, we've got basically family on both sides of the Atlantic. So one family does Christmas, the other one doesn't.
Right.
No prizes for guessing which one doesn't, which is mine.
The miners.
Exactly, yeah. The people who still live in 1984. But anyway, so
I think you'll find we're living in 1984 right now. Sorry, go on.
no, not the book. So anyway, like we get told, we get prepped. It's just like, okay, so just go create a wish list on Amazon, like, a couple of things. Sort out. Yeah. So I did what I thought my mother would do, which would be like a big long list. Just pick one or two things from it, and that'll sort you out for Christmas. What actually happened was the whole list turned up, and Amazon came like maybe 2 weeks early, bringing Christmas in the form of lots of packages.
Here,
not here.
This country. Oh, in the States.
No. From the States.
In the north.
And I was just
up north where you live.
I was like, this
where
is.
you're from.
It's like, this isn't right. This is Christmas wrapped in brown paper.
Right. Yeah.
But without context and without kind of that tradition holding it together, it was just stuff that turned up at the door.
Without anticipation.
Exactly. Without the delayed gratification, there's no satisfaction, or there is much less satisfaction. Yeah. So this is what I was saying about traditions help us frame, give context to what we have now, but also give context to what is coming next.
You're supposed to have to wait until Boxing Day to be incredibly disappointed with your presents.
Yeah, not 9 a.m.
Not 9 a.m. Christmas morning.
Yeah. Or 9 p.m. Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
So going back to 2 points. One is, isn't this what like the vintage category kind of is all about? Once you've like kind of gone through cycling and you've done the racing thing, you've got your carbon road bike and so on, you're still interested somehow in cycling, and you're like, let's look back in time. And then you start collecting the vintage bike, and you start discovering how antiquated and what a threaded bottom bracket is, and what a square taper cotted crank is, and all that kind of stuff. And you start collecting the vintage bike, just like vintage cars. Like, you can't kind of appreciate vintage cars until you've kind of driven the modern car.
I have. Can I go first?
Yeah, go on.
Because I take umbrage with the word vintage.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing. Oh, we're on the same page. Go on, do it.
So vintage and things that work are two different things, right? Vintage implies that it's nostalgic tat that's had its day, and it should be banished to the confines.
This is interesting because I've actually got a different viewpoint, but carry on.
Vanished to the confines of like the Eroica and all that stuff, where people wear woolly jumpers and have down tube shifters and 5 speeds, right? That to me is vintage, and vintage and traditional are two different things in my mind, which is a scary place, but hear me out. So that's kind of like vintage, like, nostalgic crap that doesn't really work. Traditional, we've done it certain ways for so long because it works.
Yeah.
So, there's a reason the bicycle hasn't changed in 150 odd years, and the design is broadly the same, like 2 triangles, a fork, some wheels, a series of gears and levers that make,
the roller chain.
Exactly, like handlebars, saddles, all that kind of stuff. There's a reason that stayed constant, because it works. It's a good design. It's adjustable. It's cheap. It's easy. You can fix it in your shed, or you could do. You can fix it in your shed on a Sunday afternoon, and it is a cheap way of getting primarily its base level from A to B.
We play the Hovis ad music underlying.
But also, not done.
Sorry, no, go on.
So do you know what that is?
Yeah, you know what it is.
I know what it is.
You can probably play
Not the music from the Hovis.
No, I know it's not the music from the Hovis.
It's Dvorak, mate.
Yeah.
New World Symphony. There you go. Anyway, I've forgotten.
Bergerac?
No, Bergerac's different. Bergerac and Dvorak are two different things. They might sound the same in my accent, but they are two very distinct things.
Do you remember Bergerac? That was one of those shows that when it came on, you just like, well, I don't know what, I'm changing the channel, but like it was always there.
Mate, my mum loved
It was kind of weird reggae, kind of like.
I've forgotten what my other point was.
Sorry, go on. You're talking about vintage.
Yeah, so vintage is basically nostalgic tat that don't work. Tradition, like Bergerac.
I won't
Columbo.
Columbo's brilliant. All right, can I cut in?
I just want to
okay, no, you
finish what I'm saying.
Finish.
Let the man finish. So yeah, so that's vintage. Tradition is we've done it this way for a reason, because it works. Mm-hmm. If it ain't broke, why fix it? I'm talking round seat posts, 2-piece bar and stems, traditional fork steerer tubes that have spacers. yada yada yada.
Round spaces.
Rim brakes.
All right.
Go on.
I agree
done.
with most of that, apart from your definition of the term vintage. Because vintage, in my mind, doesn't just mean old. The whole point, if you take vintage in the sense of a vintage car, like a classic, or a vintage wine, it's the old stuff that was at the top of its game, right?
No.
This is how I understand the term vintage. When you say it, when you describe it, I'm thinking vinted, as opposed to vintage. I'm thinking, oh, it's just some old crap that I don't need anymore.
It's
that
just
I get
of
rid
its
of,
time, isn't it?
right? I always think of vintage as a vintage, like as in a vintage wine or something like that. It's the best of that particular time.
Yeah, something of its
right?
time.
Of
yeah.
its time,
So
but
you're
the best
thinking
of
the
it.
dictionary definition.
Yeah.
No,
You mean the actual definition?
This is loving how this is an amazing representation of your two personalities. One highly optimistic and one pessimistic.
But just putting it in those terms, then if you are looking at vintage, because the vintage stuff, that's the old stuff that's still around, is still around because there was nothing wrong with it and it still works, right? So old campy that still works, not new campy that doesn't.
Yeah.
So, and it's intertwined with tradition as well, because there are certain things like the safety bicycle, right? There's a reason they changed it from penny farthings, because they were stupid. They're they were fast in the right hands, but they were dangerous, and lots of people lost teeth. And so that's why the safety bicycle was called the safety bicycle, and they invented the roller chain. And this isn't some dudes at SRAM with moustaches and mullets and caps. Like, oh, yeah, we're going to do something cool, man. No, these were engineers and scientists. These were genuinely smart people, not like what we got now.
Not
right?
people that
Top
have
men.
beanies that don't cover their ears.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't it cover your ears?
Just it's not fit for purpose, is it?
It's not fit for purpose.
All right, but
Like the universal derailleur hanger.
That was espionage. I was like, the UDH is like, oh look, we're gonna call it universal, and it's like, and then all of a sudden the next thing is like, oh yeah, and we've released this new thing that works with that frame.
But as a thought experiment, if like the universal derailleur hanger became the universal derailleur hanger, like there were no other derailleur hangers, that was the only one, and everything was built around that, wouldn't that be a good thing?
No, mate, I'd chuck my bike in canal because I'd have to have SRAM on it.
No, but you don't. That's the beauty of it.
Everything else would
yeah,
work on it.
if you have a universal derailleur hanger, it's universal as long as the thing you're attaching to it and the frame that you've bought works with it. Then it's universal. But it's not really universal. They only invented it so that they could get away with getting people to change their frame designs so that they could
So it's
bring out
like
their
the
T-type.
Marvel comic universe. It's only universal within the SRAM universe.
Yeah, exactly. It was a really snide way of doing things. It wasn't at first, when they first announced it, I was like, wow, they're actually doing something to help the industry. This is going to be really cool. And then all of a sudden it was like they pulled.
You've
the rug
been
from
around
underneath
this
it.
far too long to
I
know
know.
that would ever happen.
But this is again, it's not innovation. They're just trying to make money. They're not doing something. They didn't come up with that to help the industry. They came up with it so that they could sell their new thing, right?
But does that make it like everything's predicated on making money at the end of the day?
To an extent, yeah.
But
But there's two sides of that coin. There's like let's take people's money and sell them whatever, and there's the Japanese where they're like, we'll take your money, but what we're going to give you in return
It's quite good.
is worth what you're paying us. And that's the difference between SRAM and Shimano. And then you got the Italians who is like, they're like, hey, we have coffee.
Do you know what though? I'd rather have Campy on my bike than SRAM.
Whoa, this is recorded, man.
I'll put that on
We're
record.
going to get some haze.
100%. Even though
You're right. You're absolutely
the
right.
only time I've ridden Campy, I had to stop 3 or 4 times to index the gears.
But it's clever the way that's designed into the system. It's like, you were ride too long. You need a coffee. Stop now.
Was a long ride, to be fair.
There you go.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
So where have we got to?
So let's go back to what you were saying.
But having said all of that stuff about vinted, like, do you is it only vintage after you've ridden, a modern bike and appreciated the modern bike before you can actually make a call on, oh well, this is vintage stuff. This stuff isn't as good. I still appreciate, what it was because I've ridden.
You do because you grew up in an era riding bikes like seriously in that sort of 2010 to 2015 era. Where bikes were like, they were modernized enough. You had carbon fiber, you had all this fancy stuff, you had aero stuff, whatever. But the actual mechanical
It was
side
still a
of
bike.
it was still a traditional method of changing gear, and basically they all worked the same. They were pretty interchangeable. There were still like various standards and things like that, if you can call them standards, but they were pretty much now. And then after that, all of a sudden we got into let's hide all the cables, and then suddenly everything's proprietary. Like if you buy a bike from a particular brand and you want to change something, you have to go back to that brand. You can't just go into a bike shop and get whatever. It'll all be compatible.
I guess it's like my first road bike had down tube shifters.
Yeah, mine too.
And it was like the right shifter was indexed and the front gears were not.
Yeah.
And when I first got onto SDI shifters, like integrated shifters, like that was like,
It was like a mind-blowing moment. wasn't it?
That was innovation. That was true innovation. It took a couple of iterations before it always worked, even from the very beginning. It took a couple of iterations before it was like foolproof.
Yeah.
But that's innovation. They didn't just do it for the sake of being different. They did it, and it actually helped. All of a sudden you could change gear while out of the saddle.
Yeah.
That was huge.
But there was a problem there to be solved.
Yeah.
Now, really, we've kind of like 2015,
there aren't any problems
we
to be-
reached peak bike.
Yeah.
Basically.
So going from like a mechanical SDI shifter to an electronic shifter, like the the change from one to the other definitely isn't as great as going from like a down tube shifter.
So yeah, exactly. And also they both work the same.
It's the same chain passing across the same cassette.
Yeah.
It's just what actuates the shift in the derailleur that's different.
It's
So
amazing.
it's all
how
mechanical.
still mechanical. It's amazing how you can blow people's minds because they've just, and through no fault of their own, because they've never really thought about it. It's like when you push the button, you press the paddle, or you hit the switch, the same thing is happening at the back of the bike.
Back of the bike,
exactly the same thing is happening. An arm is moving and it's knocking the chain off one sprocket onto another sprocket. You don't. I said this to somebody the other day, and it took them a couple of minutes to kind of like get it. I was like, the gear change doesn't happen when you press the button. Right? It needs a 360-degree rotation of the wheel before the chain has actually changed.
It's inhibited by where the ramps are.
Yeah. So every time people go on about the speed, the shifting speed, the speed, I'm like, no, there's no. Pressing the button is just an actuation, whether it's cable actuated or a servo motor. It doesn't make any difference. The actual shifting is happening when the chain derails. That's where that's from. Onto the next sprocket.
I feel like this is Ev's mic drop moment.
Yeah.
I don't want to drop my
Don't drop your
pedal
mic.
spanner
Yeah.
on my foot.
But it's true. It's like, that is like
It's-
going from, like what you were saying, going from the down tube shifter to the integrated SDI shifter was huge. That
That's
solved a
innovation.
genuine problem.
Yeah,
That is innovation.
Yeah.
Going from cable actuated shifters to electronic shifters, that's not solved the problem.
No.
That's
just changed.
That's just
just changed what they can sell you. So
well,
that's
it's the same way of doing it. Oh, it's a different way of doing the same thing, isn't it?
yeah. So
I can wash my clothes in a bucket,
yeah.
or I can
Still
chuck it in a
washing.
washer.
You're
It's
still
still
washing
washing.
them. Yeah.
Just
So
one
still-
slightly easier,
Exactly,
more
yeah.
fun
Well,
than the other.
one may be more convenient, or
Yeah.
maybe it won't be more convenient because when you wash your clothes by hand, you can see whether they're getting clean. If you stick them in the washing machine, you have to
No
wait an
idea what's
hour
going on. Yeah, exactly.
or 3 hours to pull it out and go, oh, it's still not clean.
But this is why, like, I think tradition is often poo-pooed because it's not cool. But when you think about tradition mechanically and why things are a certain way, then it gives what we have now more context. And some of it is it's just not fit for purpose.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff that is coming out of bike factories and from manufacturers' marketing pamphlets is just not fit for purpose.
Yeah, it's all bullshit.
And people are getting mugged off by
don't
this
know any
dross
better. Yeah.
because they don't know any better,
Yeah.
because they haven't had the context in which to put it into that kind of lineage.
Every time somebody releases a slightly different profile of rim, I'm like, yeah, this is
Tires.
You're not. Yeah.
Tires.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you name it on a bicycle, there's marketing spiel to go with it, and it's like,
3D
do we
printed
need
saddles.
this stuff? I mean, don't.
Here, well, why don't we do a list? Like, what's just change for the sake of trying to sell somebody something new, and what is genuine innovation? We've already got STI shifters.
Okay, can we think of
genuine
3
innovation.
things that is genuinely innovative that we know of that's come in for 2025?
Oh, for 2025.
Yeah.
Something that's genuinely.
I would argue the only thing that I know of would be the law shoes.
Yeah,
I-
that's a genuine.
Is that-
That's a
like, kind of-
genuine.
Is that not in the air a little bit because it's a different way of doing something, but it's still like so you can still wedge and use footbeds and shims and things on a regular.
It's what that
shoe.
does to your ankles.
Oh,
it's
so
what
this
the
is
law
it's
shoe
all
does
about
to your
like
ankle.
changing that.
Yeah.
It is a
Alright.
different construction method. It's a different way of sizing. It's a different way of thinking about. The
Are they ever
mechanics
going to
of
look
cycling.
like an S-Works 7? Is really the question on everybody's mind. The people have a right to know.
You sound like a reporter with your little. You look like one with your little.
I look more like somebody on a game show in
People
The
have
Price
a
is Right or
to
something.
know.
Like.
Yeah.
Jeremy Beadle.
That was the example you went for.
He never did anything dodgy. He was nice. He was really good. He was one of the good ones. Him
Yeah.
and Andy Peters.
He was innovative.
He was innovative.
You've been framed
Oh yeah.
25 years before YouTube.
25 years before Big Brother.
Anyway, let's bring it back to bikes.
Anyway, yeah.
All right, so we've got
Alright,
one
so-
potential
alright,
one, which
law
is the
shoes,
law
which
shoes.
but that is also really very, very, very niche as well. But maybe
Most people
but
that are riding
maybe
drop bar bikes
give
clip
it-
themselves to their bikes.
Yeah, true.
So
But
I
give
wouldn't say it was niche.
Give it maybe 5 to 10 years, and that might be everything. That might be when you
But again,
want to buy shoes.
that's.
You get your foot scanned. And
Would
then
you describe that as innovative or iterative, though?
iterative. I think there's a certain level of innovation there, but it's not to the point because it's got a long way to go.
Highly
It's kind of like it's still in alpha stage, isn't it? In
highly
terms of-
iterative.
Highly
It's
iterative.
not a complete
Yeah,
product.
Yeah,
yet.
yeah.
All right.
See, when you said, "Can I think of?" So I can think of a bunch of things, but then you said 2025, and I was like, "No, pretty much nothing."
I'll tell you
Yeah,
what.
I feel like we're slowly regressing, aren't we? We're regressing back to traditions like the bottom bracket.
Not
like,
soon enough.
like 68 mil BSA threaded bottom brackets. Everyone's like called out. Like the bike manufacturers are moving back to that standard, even though it may be a slightly inferior standard,
Yeah.
and it doesn't necessarily make it better, but because of the ease of use, then my bike manufacturers have gone back because the riding public has gone.
I
you
think,
know, we're fed
that's-
up of all these.
Yeah, I think that's
precedent
got a
standards.
little bit more to do with public perception. Because you go on any forum like mechanical forum and people go like, "Oh, press fit is rubbish." I'm like, you don't know anything about press fit, man. You're just like, oh, you're on a forum in the middle of the night.
So-
It's perfectly. It's how all your hub works. It's how your hubs work and have always worked. It's how all wheels have always worked. Yes, Matt.
So press fit is a perfectly adequate standard.
Yeah.
I'm happy to.
You said
put
the
that
word
on
standard
record.
though, and that's a bit of a bone of contention in the
Standard.
bike industry.
But unless you have bearing presses and all that stuff at home in your shed, how are you going to service your bike?
Do you have a bottom bracket tool which is different for pretty much every make of bottom
I
bracket
have bottom bracket tools for every bottom bracket that I've had.
that you've had?
Two.
Two.
I've got a Praxis
Right.
one and I've got a Shimano.
I've got
Holotech
16.
One. Yeah. But it's not.
And that's all. That's
but
not
it's
all
not
of them.
inconceivable.
It's not inconceivable.
Someone who has a Shimano Holotech
Yeah.
crank with a BSA threaded bottom bracket could go and spend 20-25 quid on that tool so that they can service their bottom bracket in their shed.
To be fair, you can get a bearing press for.
Don't come
40
at me
quid
with blooming
off Amazon.
technicalities.
But that is all I'm saying is that is not. They didn't go back to BSA because it's better.
BSA never left.
It never left. It's always been around, and they were like, oh, actually, it's cheaper. It's cheaper to design frames. The tooling exists because a standard tool that size and everything, like, so it's easy to get. Threading tools are really expensive, like not just chasing, but actual threading tools, especially at those sizes. So if you're having to replace them every, I don't know how many you can do. Maybe you can do 500, and then your tool's blunt, and you need to replace them. That is a saving if you're like if you're Trek or Giant or someone or Specialized, and you're making however many hundreds of thousands of frames a month, right? You go back to a standard like that, and you're like, okay, that tooling is actually cheaper.
But I think for the people, the socialist in me, the peoples who want to, tinker with their own bikes like we used to do, and take things apart and clean them and re-grease them and service them, going back to a quote-unquote more traditional standard like that is a good thing.
Yeah.
Because it makes things last longer, and it makes the service interval longer between each replacement of that part, which can be a good thing. And that's kind of what the bike always was.
And also, if the more people that stick to that older standard, you roll into any bike shop and they're going to be able to deal with it.
Exactly.
It's not a special thing with a special tool that, like, oh, we don't have that, we're going to have to order it in, it's going to take 3 weeks.
Oh, you've got BB90, nice one. That'll be 100 years until your bearing comes back into stock.
Okay, so is this a good example of a return to a tradition, having had a period of innovation or experimentation? The teenage years are over. We're coming back to
teenage
maturity.
years of BB90.
When are we going back to brake hoses outside the frame?
Not soon enough.
All right, I got one for you.
Go on then.
What about carbon fiber as a bicycle frame material? Has this now become the tradition? Is this the new...
I wouldn't say it was the tradition. I think it's the norm.
It's the norm. Because, pretty much everyone we size up for a new bike, if we present them a metal bike, there's usually a bit of pushback. Like, why are you doing this?
Why are you doing this to me?
Why would you do this
I want to spend my money.
Why would you do this to me? I'm going to be ridiculed at the calf.
Yeah.
And also, when presenting a metal bike, which is almost as expensive as a carbon fiber bike, there seems to be a disconnect between quality or quantity or whatever it is.
And then you know what happened?
And then what happened?
Titanium.
Titanium?
All of a sudden, they were like, oh, we can make bikes out of titanium. That sounds fancy and futuristic and expensive. Let's do that instead. So they all start doing titanium, they hike the prices up, and actually, mate, just get a steel bike. Kidding me?
But
or an alloy bike.
You're saying that carbon is actually quite a good material to make a bike out of.
It is. It's a
because
very good
you
material.
can.
It's lighter weight.
It's lighter. You can.
For the same stiffness, same
Yeah,
strength.
exactly. You have a bit more control over the characteristics of different areas of the bike, depending on how you lay it up. You've got way more options with regards to tube shapes and profiles. So, God forbid if you do want something that looks like a spaceship, you can do. So, from that standpoint, it does give you a lot of versatility. It's cheaper to manufacture en masse once you've got the molds. So once your numbers get beyond a certain level, you're limited by time and people welding tubes together.
Bear in mind the labour. I think there's actually not that much difference, or in fact, carbon is probably there's a bit more. Anyway,
we can debate that.
So the two
there's an economic.
The two most popular materials are carbon fibre and
aluminium,
or aluminium alloy, right? And those are, frankly, the two best materials to make a bike frame from. They're not as repairable or recyclable as say steel, but there's a cost to that as well.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to repair steel,
would
you
you guys
light
agree
a fire.
that, like, the average rider out there today is riding a carbon fibre bike with electronic shifting?
Overwhelmingly,
in terms of like the roadie community,
The roadie community.
100%. Yeah.
So, this is the new norm, and so when do norms become tradition? Then, like, are we going to look back at this in like 10 years' time, being like, oh, carbon fibre, that's so traditional.
Well, they've been making it for 30 years.
Yeah,
it's not new.
Well, tradition. Would you say that a tradition only becomes a tradition once it's been surpassed by something else?
That's a good point, actually.
No, because like we have Christmas, right? Like we celebrate Christmas every year. It's gone through different kind of iterations of what it is, but it's still Christmas, I guess.
That means different things to different people.
Well, people have always ridden bikes,
Yeah.
regardless of what they're made out of, how slopey the top tube is, whether their group sets are, cable actuated, electronic, Italian, Japanese, whatever. People have always ridden bikes. So I think we're kind of looking at the wrong thing here.
Yeah, maybe
So,
we're just talking about.
We're talking about trends.
trends.
Yeah, the material's irrelevant.
The cycling
it's
tradition
more about the actual...
is more about what you do with the bike and what the riding is, and the other stuff is all, in my opinion, peripheral, and is more of a trend, or a series of trends, rather than traditions. So traditions is like riding the bike.
Yeah.
There is a tradition behind the Tour de France.
Yeah.
It is a 3-week tour of a certain country in a geographical location that's bloody hard and, has a certain amount of, you spend, days in the mountains, you have flat stages, you sometimes go to northern France to the cobbles and get muddy and wet. That's tradition in my mind. This is trends, and trends come and go.
Great. So basically,
Bosh!
we don't need to worry about all the trends.
No.
I'm conflating
Basically,
huge worry.
I've just
over
killed
it.
the last hour.
Basically, the entire conversation's been irrelevant because we've figured out that we're not actually talking about traditions, and I don't know. We haven't. Cycling hasn't been.
Cycling hasn't changed.
Hasn't changed. It's still about pushing pedals and riding hard.
Yeah.
But I would argue that what is important in cycling, or what people perceive to be important in cycling, has changed, and some of the tradition has been lost because from what I kind of see, I don't ride my bike much anymore, but it's not about the riding of the bike as much as it kind of was in.
It's now
In days gone by.
It's now that
You know
YouTube,
what I mean?
Yeah, that YouTube with that Equinox show that I sent you guys on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Equinox, if you're not of a certain age, was Channel 4's version of basically Panorama.
Yeah.
And there was and they did this feature on, it was essentially like frame building, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well, just the bike industry.
The bike industry.
The bike industry in Britain.
Yeah.
In the UK.
Circa 1980 something or other.
83, 84,
Mid-80s.
Mid-80s, yeah. And we're talking about Halfords back when they manufactured bicycles.
Lugged
steel bikes.
Yeah.
Brazed frames, and like the tube set was the trade price of the tube set was measured in like a couple of pounds or pence.
Yeah,
like,
pence. This is imperial. This is back in the day before, the metric.
Guinness.
Yeah, shillings.
Shillings.
But that's the point, isn't it? It's like, the tradition.
Go on.
Like the actual kind of like the traditions that are involved with riding the bike are almost peripheral now to the aesthetics of cycling and the culture surrounding cycling.
That's the biggest change.
And the culture has shifted a lot. I watched the Urbury documentary again over Christmas, and the culture of like club cycling in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, way different to the culture of club cycling now. I'm not saying either is better.
Well,
it's
now
just
it's
different.
Now it's not about cycling. Now it's just a fashion show.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like so the traditions of, they've kind of been almost put by the wayside a little bit in favour of trends that focus more on aesthetics. Like Strava, Swift, all that kind of stuff, rather than previous kind of trends, if you like, of being weird, getting togged up in the same club kit and going to the cafe and having a cup of tea. So it's just different.
And still doing it when you're in your 70s.
Yeah, it's just different. It's not better or worse. It's just different. But the traditions of getting out, riding the bike, are maybe secondary to what they once were in maybe days gone by. I don't know.
I think indoor riding has changed cycling as a...
By change, do you think killed?
Not killed, but it's kind of taken away like a certain population from actual cycling. So I consider indoor cycling a completely different sport altogether. And there are definitely people, like, aka the people next door to us,
Spin studio, yeah.
the spin studio. There's a very specific kind of audience for that.
They're gym rats.
Yeah, and there's nothing to do with like kind of cycling outside at all. And that to me it feels weird. And
there is a very good reason for it, or a couple of good reasons for it.
Yeah.
You know, which are one,
Gets you fit really freaking quick.
well, it gets you strong. Don't know about
Not cycling fit.
Yeah, no, not
just
cycling,
fit.
not at all. Yeah, well, it's good cardio, right?
yeah.
Oh, don't use that word.
Good cardio. Get on an exercise bike. Get on your exercise. Jump on your Peloton, guys. Jump on the Peloton. Join me. I don't know Peloton. It's but you know, there are the two things, especially in this country. We're talking about this country. We're talking about like city life, especially, right? There are two things that affect your enjoyment, let's say, of cycling.
Living
right?
in a city.
Right. One is drivers.
Yeah.
Who, like, you know, go everybody who rides a bike is like, you know, everybody's got a story about, you know, it's getting tiresome every time I go out on my bike. Somebody inadvertently almost kills me.
I feel like
You know, even if they're
traffic
not-
would be a better term.
I know, I'm going to say drivers, because traffic is if you're on a bike, you're traffic as well. If you're walking, you're still traffic. You're in the way of everyone else. Right?
I've only ever been hit by cyclists. That's why traffic is a better term.
Because you commute in a high cycling traffic route to work, right?
We've discussed this at length.
Right.
Yeah. let's
So
not go
okay,
into
so that. But anyway, that's one. The roads, the road surface is dangerous. Drivers are dangerous because they're incompetent. Other cyclists are often incompetent.
So
Pedestrians
the
are
environment
a
is
danger
not-
to
yeah.
themselves and others. Giant rats, crows, magpies. Anyway, there's that. And then there's also the weather. The weather's a huge factor, especially if you didn't grow up like probably us, where you're like, well, this is England. We live here.
We
go
don't have
out-
a choice.
Right, we don't have a choice. Like, I got to go
I
to
didn't
work.
have a turbo trainer.
Yeah, I didn't have a turbo trainer. You just like you want to train through the winter. You get your gloves on, put your jacket on, and just get out there. And then, you know, you get poured on, but it's kind of, there's a weird perverse enjoyment that you eventually get out of it, especially if you're out for like a lap and your end point is your own house.
Well, there wasn't a choice, right?
There wasn't a choice.
Now there's
right?
a choice where you don't have to go outside.
It's you look out the window, or you wake up and you hear the rain beating down on the windows.
Oh, just jump on Zwift.
I'll just jump on the turbo. Like Zwift is another. That's another thing. It's a social media site more than any kind of like tool for cycling. But and the same with Strava. You know, you can just like, you do it the traditional way, mate. Put on a YouTube video of some vintage early 2000s bike race and just ride along to what they're doing.
But
Or watch
all
a
of
movie.
this, you know, this dictates kind of what happens in a seasonal kind of scale. So, you know, you might ride your bike through the summer, and then come winter time, instead of transferring to your winter bike and riding outside and doing different kinds of riding, or, you know, mountain biking or whatever it is, then you go and, you know, jump on Zwift for the rest of the winter, and so that tradition changes. Like the winter bike, as we've talked about in different podcasts before, is languishing. It's almost dead. Like,
Sir.
yeah.
I was actually going to say something on exactly that point.
Yeah.
As much as we all hate it, gravel is kind of bringing back that. You know, it's like, it used to be the winter's coming, you put away your nice bike, you get on your winter bike, your Kinesis Race Light or whatever it was,
Now
with
you
your
get on
mud
your
guards, and you go
gravel
out.
bike.
Now you get a gravel bike, and that's your winter bike. You're not worried about that one getting dirty, because that's what it's designed to do. It's designed for that sort of terrain. You know, some people have mountain bikes as well, and then maybe they switch to mountain biking, depending on where you live. In London, it's not that easy.
And
'cause
gravel
it's not-
bikes have been described as like just a 90s hardtail, right?
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
basically
and-
what they are.
No.
They're pretty close
It's
with drop
not.
bars. It's like it's a hybrid. Gravel bike is a hybrid bike.
But what people were excited about was that it kind of brought back that spirit of just going out and riding your bike and exploring and not having to race. Although the UCI's turned it into
Now they've just
a racing
they've messed
thing.
that up as well. But
But you
It's
know,
not about chasing numbers, is it?
the worst thing about riding a winter bike in the winter was you're still on the roads. The roads are now wet. they're dirty, there's leaves all over the place, and you have to contend with drivers, and it's darker most of the time when you're training. Gravel gets rid of all of that. It puts you away from drivers. You're already on questionable like gravel roads and things, but you've got the bike to ride on it.
Yeah. So maybe trends are coming back around. Like the tradition of riding bikes just stays the same, but trends come and go. The pendulum swings, as you were saying at the beginning, one way and the other. And so maybe we're just seeing a swing back towards that kind of exploratory, kind of exciting bike riding. Just riding your bike for the sake of riding your bike, rather than chasing numbers or whatever.
We need more of that. Not the chasing the numbers bit. They're just riding the bike for the sake of riding the bike.
Yeah. But it's, like I said, it's a fashion show now, isn't it?
Well, just go ride your bike. Start the trend.
Enjoy the actual riding of your bike instead of what you look like or what bike you're riding. Oh, last quick point. We were watching a bike race earlier.
Mm-hmm.
They're all on the latest kit, right? They're riding the latest, the SL8, the Colnago, the whatever, the Scott, the Giant, all of these bikes. But you can't see the bikes because there's riders on them. And they've got really loud jerseys. Actually, when you watch that stuff, suddenly the bikes fade into obscurity. You don't even notice which bike they're riding. Half the time they come towards you anyway. So you don't really notice. Like, as soon as you put a person on a bike, that inanimate object just becomes a tool for getting from one place to another.
Well, they all look so similar.
They're all the
these days.
same.
Yeah,
Bike's still a bike.
Well, back in the day, they were all round steel tube bikes, weren't they?
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's all. It's like F1. I don't know. They all
No, it's nothing like it.
they all
That's
look
a
like cars.
podcast for another time.
Yeah.
We're going to start our motor racing podcast soon.
All right. I think we've run out of steam here, haven't we? So.
Well, I think we've posed more questions than we've answered, haven't we, really?
Tune in next time.
We thought we had a really good
Direction.
I think those are the best.
direction.
I think those are the best
and then
conversations.
we've dispelled our
Yeah.
original hypothesis and decided that we didn't really have a clue what we were on about anyway.
We're just worried about trends,
Yeah,
and cycling will continue.
in
the
some
tradition.
way, shape or form.
Yeah. Can't kill Christmas.
Can't
kill
reinvent
cycling.
the wheel.
All right, guys. Catch you on the next one. If you made it to the end of this episode, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, do leave us a rating or review, as this really helps other riders find our podcast too, and motivates us to keep making more episodes. Thanks for your support, and catch you on the next one.
Suffering from numb hands, tingling toes, and any other persistent discomforts when you ride? These are all signs that your bike fit could be improved. If you're bike fit curious, get in touch with Wei or Matt by emailing info@foundation.fit or finding them on Instagram @FDN_bikefit. Finally, for all your bike servicing needs, custom dream bike or hand-built wheels, go to www.frequencycycleworks.com or find me on Instagram @frequencycycleworks. Until next time, keep on spinning.